By 2030, India is projected to be the world's third largest economy, home to the youngest population of any major nation, and a cultural powerhouse influencing everything from technology to cinema. But here's the real question. What will everyday life in India actually look like when that future arrives? Will the country truly become the next global engine of growth? Or will its massive ambitions clash with equally massive challenges like inequality, urban congestion, and climate stress? 2030 isn't just another date on the calendar, it's a turning point. According to UN projections, that's when India will hit its demographic peak, when its economy could rival Japan and Germany combined, and when its global role will no longer be emerging, but defining. In this video, we are going beyond the headlines. Not just the hype, not just the glowing predictions, but a deep dive into the real opportunities and risks that will shape India's future. From politics and economics to technology, culture, and climate, we'll unpack how this decade sets the stage for the India of 2030, and why the choices made now will matter for the entire world. By 2030, India is widely expected to become the world's third largest economy, with a GDP projected between $7 to $8 trillion. That would place it just behind the United States and China, surpassing traditional giants like Japan and Germany. But what makes this rise even more remarkable is not just the scale of numbers, but the drivers behind them. Unlike China's state-driven model or America's consumption-heavy model, India's growth is emerging from a unique mix of consumption, services, infrastructure, and manufacturing. It's a four-engine plane, all revving up at once, though not without turbulence. One of the most ambitious pillars of this rise is Make in India, the government's flagship initiative to turn the country into the next global factory. By 2030, India aims to be a leader in electronics assembly, electric vehicles, and even defense production. The idea is to not just build for India, but to build for the world. Apple is already shifting more of its supply chain to India, while Tesla and other EV makers are eyeing massive opportunities. But challenges remain. Infrastructure bottlenecks, red tape, and competition from agile players like Vietnam and Indonesia could slow progress. India's dream of being the next China is within reach, but it won't come easy. Where India already shines, and will shine brighter by 2030, is in the services and technology sector. IT exports are set to hit record highs, powering global back-end systems, cloud platforms, and cybersecurity frameworks. The rise of artificial intelligence, fintech, health tech, and digital services will keep India at the center of global outsourcing. But with a twist, instead of just providing labor, India will increasingly provide innovation. Think of it less as the world's call center, and more as the world's AI lab and fintech hub. Meanwhile, the domestic consumer market is set to explode. With a middle class expected to reach over 500 million people, India will be one of the world's largest consumer bases. Rising urbanization will fuel everything from luxury malls to e-commerce booms, while real estate markets in cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune will grow at lightning speed. Add to this the surge in digital banking, credit expansion, and insurance penetration, and India's consumer economy looks less like a sleeping giant and more like an awakened dragon, hungry, ambitious, and fast-moving. But the real story of India's future is written not just in GDP charts, but in the faces of its people. By 2030, India will still enjoy what economists call a demographic dividend, a young, working-age population with a median age of just 29 years. This makes India the youngest major nation on the planet, and in theory, a global supplier of talent. From coding in Silicon Valley to engineering in Germany, Indian workers are already everywhere. The opportunity lies in turning this young energy inward, into jobs, innovation, and entrepreneurship at home. The risk? If growth isn't inclusive, mass unemployment and underemployment could turn this asset into a liability. One of the biggest untapped strengths is women in the workforce. Female labor participation in India lags behind global averages, but by 2030, digital jobs, remote work, and gig economy platforms could shift that balance. More women entering tech, healthcare, and education could add trillions to the economy. Yet cultural barriers, safety, concerns, and social expectations remain challenges. India's future will partly depend on whether it can unlock the power of its women. Then there's the story of the Indian diaspora, over 30 million strong, spread across the US, UK, Canada, the Middle East, and beyond. By 2030, their influence will be stronger than ever. Indians already lead some of the world's biggest corporations, Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and IBM, to name a few. Remittances from skilled workers abroad continue to pour billions into the Indian economy each year. But there's another trend quietly reshaping things: return migration. Many Indians educated and trained abroad are now coming back, bringing skills, networks, and capital with them. This brain circulation, instead of the old brain drain, could prove to be one of India's hidden superpowers. Economics and demographics are powerful forces, but India's trajectory will ultimately be shaped by its politics and governance. By 2030, the BJP's dominance is likely to face stronger challenges from opposition coalitions, especially at the state level. Indian politics may become more regionalized, with powerful chief ministers and state governments asserting themselves against the central government. This push and pull between federal and regional power could either keep democracy vibrant or create gridlock in governance. At the same time, India is undergoing a massive experiment in digital governance. Aadhaar, UPI, and smart city initiatives have already transformed daily life, and by 2030, much of India's bureaucracy may be fully digitized. That means faster services and more inclusion, but it also raises concerns: privacy, surveillance, censorship, and freedom of expression. Will digital tools empower citizens, or will they tighten the state's control? The answer will define India's democracy in the digital age. Globally, India's diplomatic role is set to expand dramatically. As part of the Quad alliance with the US, Japan, and Australia, India is a key counterbalance to China in the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, through BRICS+, India positions itself as a leader of the developing world, a voice of the global south on climate, trade, and global reform. By 2030, India will need to walk a fine line, maintaining strong ties with the US, avoiding open conflict with China, and still keeping historical links with Russia alive. In other words, India's balancing act becomes the world's balancing act. One of the most visible signs of India's transformation by 2030 will be its infrastructure and cities. India is already building at a pace unmatched in its modern history. At the center of this boom is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, a 1,500-kilometer stretch of highways, freight corridors, smart cities, and industrial hubs designed to connect two of India's biggest economic engines. Alongside this, bullet trains are set to become a reality, with the Mumbai-Ahmedabad line projected to be operational this decade, symbolizing India's ambition to match Japan and China in high-speed rail. Metro systems are expanding rapidly in nearly every major city, turning once chaotic traffic hubs into modern transit-oriented centers. But these bright spots coexist with darker realities. By 2030, India's urban population will exceed 600 million, creating pressure on housing, sanitation, and air quality. Slums and informal settlements will remain a challenge, as millions migrate to cities in search of work. Congestion, pollution, and waste management will test the resilience of every urban plan. The question is not whether India can build, but whether it can build sustainably and inclusively. Energy lies at the heart of this transformation. India has set ambitious renewable energy targets, aiming to generate 500 gigawatts of clean power by 2030, primarily through solar and wind, with hydrogen emerging as a futuristic bet. Yet the country still depends heavily on coal for 70% of its electricity, and balancing this dependency with green commitments will be one of India's toughest acts. Add to this the EV revolution, millions of electric cars, bikes, and buses flooding the roads by 2030, and India will need charging infrastructure on a scale never seen before. The energy transition isn't just about megawatts, it's about redesigning the everyday experience of power, transport, and mobility. Housing and real estate will also tell a story of contrasts. Demand for affordable housing will soar as incomes rise, but so will the growth of gated communities, luxury towers, and sprawling suburbs. This dual reality, affluence on one side and scarcity on the other, will shape how Indians experience urban life. Government programs like Housing for All are pushing for modernization, yet the gap between aspiration and reality remains wide. By 2030, India's cities could either be vibrant engines of opportunity or pressure cookers of inequality. If infrastructure is the skeleton of India's future, then technology is the nervous system. By 2030, India's digital transformation will be complete. Already, UPI has revolutionized payments, processing billions of transactions every month. By the end of the decade, UPI and similar platforms could expand beyond India's borders, becoming a model for global financial inclusion. With 1.2 billion people connected to the internet, India will be the most digitally connected nation on Earth. E-governance, AI-driven public services, and digital identity through Aadhaar will make government more accessible, but will also raise debates about surveillance and data protection. Artificial intelligence and robotics will be at the heart of this new India. Startups and research labs are already experimenting with AI for agriculture, healthcare, and education. By 2030, India aims to position itself as a leader in ethical and low-cost AI solutions. Meanwhile, in space, ISRO will continue to break barriers, following Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan with deeper missions to Mars, the Moon, and possibly even human spaceflight programs. Private players like Skyroot and Agnikul are racing to make India a hub for commercial space launches, much like SpaceX has done for the US. And then there's the startup revolution. By 2030, India is expected to be the second largest startup hub in the world, trailing only the US fintech, healthtech, agritech, and cleantech will dominate the unicorn list. The rise of digital-first businesses will change how Indians shop, pay, learn, and heal. But challenges persist. The funding winter that startups have occasionally faced, and the tightening grip of regulations, could test whether India's entrepreneurial energy remains unstoppable or stumbles under its own weight. Beyond numbers and technology, India in 2030 will be defined by its people and culture. Education will be a cornerstone of this transformation. The new education policy, NEP, promises a shift towards skill-based learning, creativity, and digital literacy. By 2030, India could emerge with universities that rank among the world's best, especially in technology and medicine, supported by booming edtech platforms that reach every corner of the country. But bridging the rural-urban education gap will remain a challenge. Health and quality of life will be equally important. India has made strides toward universal health coverage, but by 2030, the divide between private and public healthcare may still linger. Lifestyle diseases like diabetes and hypertension will remain widespread, even as malnutrition continues to haunt poorer regions. At the same time, mental health awareness will grow, driven by youth activism and digital platforms breaking long-standing taboos. The story of India's health will be one of progress, but also of unfinished battles. On the social front, India will continue to navigate the complexities of caste, religion, and regional diversity. By 2030, urban India will be more cosmopolitan than ever, with millennials and Gen Z reshaping traditions. Yet rural India, where hundreds of millions still live, will hold on to older cultural patterns. This tension between old and new, between cosmopolitan metros and traditional villages, will shape India's identity. At the same time, media, migration, and inter-community exchanges will blur boundaries, creating a more blended, hybrid culture. If there's one area where India's rise is already visible globally, it's in soft power. 2030, Bollywood and streaming platforms will rival Hollywood in global influence. Netflix, Amazon Prime, and regional OTT giants will export Indian films, series, and music to every corner of the world. With India's linguistic and cultural diversity, the future could see not just Bollywood, but also Tollywood, Kollywood, and other regional cinemas making global waves. Indian food, yoga, and spirituality will deepen their global adoption. Indian cuisine is already a staple across Europe, the Middle East, and North America, and by 2030, it may be as mainstream as Italian or Chinese food. Yoga, already a billion-dollar wellness industry, will grow even further, while India's spiritual traditions will fuel booming tourism and retreats catering to global seekers. The diaspora will remain one of India's greatest strengths. With over 30 million Indians abroad, their influence in politics, business, and culture will only grow. Tech CEOs of Google, Microsoft, and Adobe already serve as role models for millions, and by 2030, even more Indians will hold leadership roles across Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and beyond. This influence doesn't just reflect India's talent pool, it shapes global perceptions of what India represents. And finally, there's cricket diplomacy. The Indian Premier League, IPL, is already the world's richest cricket league, drawing stars from Australia, England, the Caribbean, and beyond. By 2030, the IPL may be less a sports league and more a global entertainment empire, broadcasting Indian culture to billions. Cricket, often called India's unofficial religion, will continue to serve as a bridge across nations, connecting India with the Middle East, Africa, and the wider Commonwealth. By 2030, India won't just be another fast-growing country, it will be repatterning its identity. No longer simply a developing country, India's ambition will be to approach the status of a near-developed or emerging high-income nation. The trajectory won't be smooth, but the direction is clear: better infrastructure, stronger institutions, more global integration, and a shift in mindset from scarcity to scale. One of the most profound changes will be in the flow of human capital. Instead of the old story of brain drain, talented Indians leaving for jobs abroad and rarely returning, the narrative will shift toward brain circulation. By 2030, more professionals, researchers, and entrepreneurs will come back, bringing with them networks, capital, and ideas refined abroad. That circulation of talent will be one of India's quietest revolutions, transforming universities, startups, and even governance in ways that go beyond GDP. In effect, India will be remaking the rules of its own development. The systems, institutions, and values that were inherited or imposed will be retooled, with more local voice, more digital infrastructure, more regional connectivity. The challenge will be to hold the balance: growth without disruption, modernization without alienation, scale without weakening social cohesion. When India steps fully into its 2030 future, it will matter not just to 1.4 billion Indians, but to the architecture of global power itself. First, India will increasingly be a stabilizing force in Asia. In a multipolar world of competing blocs, India's posture of bridges, not blocks, will matter. Rather than aligning rigidly with one great power, India can act as a pivot, maintaining strategic autonomy, even while engaging deeply with the US, Europe, and East Asia. The diplomat plus one, it can be a moderator in regional conflicts and a voice of balance in forums torn by polarization. Second, India will be a supplier of skills, ideas, and soft power. The world's economies increasingly need talent: AI experts, health innovation, climate, technologists, and India's vast pool of educated youth gives it a structural edge. Indian culture, already global through cinema, cuisine, diaspora networks, yoga, and spiritual traditions, will become more assertive in shaping global tastes and values. India's influence may then become subtle but pervasive. Norms set in New Delhi could ripple into Seoul, Nairobi, Sao Paulo, and beyond. Trade rules, climate agreements, digital standards, India's voice will carry weight. For millions of Indian households, the story of 2030 will be personal. Over this decade, tens of millions will be uplifted into the middle class, moving from hand-to-mouth subsistence to stability, a better home, reliable power, access to healthcare, faster internet. For them, modernization will mean real change, new opportunity, new dignity. Yet alongside that progress will come tensions. Urban living, with its conveniences, also brings pace, stress, isolation. The mental pressure of competing in a high-tech, fast-moving economy could strain social bonds, especially in families straddling tradition and modernity. The aspirational leaps may sometimes leave behind those in the margins: rural areas, elderly generations, and communities slow to adapt. There will also be emotional questions. What does identity mean when languages shift, when jobs change, when migration becomes routine? As India modernizes, its people will wrestle with preserving roots even as they sprint toward the future. The emotional toll of rapid change, the loneliness, the dislocation, the inequalities, will need as much attention as the infrastructure or the balance sheets. Let's bring this all together. We've seen how India's rise will be shaped by economic scale, technology leaps, demographic energy, infrastructure revamp, reimagined social systems, and cultural influence. But we also confront the paradox at its heart: massive opportunities, massive challenges. Yes, India in 2030 could be one of the world's leading powers. Yes, it could be a source of innovation, hope, and new models. But for that to happen, it must manage the pitfalls: inequality, environmental stress, political polarization, and social alienation. So here's the final thought I leave you with. By 2030, India won't just be a country rising, it will be a country reshaping the world. It won't be perfect. It won't be easy. But it will be bold, and the choices we make today, in policy, in culture, in values, will ripple across decades.